No wonder people like Epstein get away with it, Kate.
First of all, I want to say welcome to Ombudsmom Corner. This is our new YouTube exclusive segment that we're putting out, and it's going to be the Friday after our Thursday episode drops for everybody. So I'm excited about that. There are only thousands of Epstein emails that were released by, I think it was Senate or House committees?
Oversight.
I know it was oversight, but I don't remember if it was House or Senate.
I forget.
And they were all like Epstein's emails with people. And so Democrats released like a very small selection of Trump-related emails. And then Republicans just like dropped this treasure trove of like thousands after the Democrats did this. I think to try to flood the zone, but it unintentionally like made everything worse for the scandal because it brought a lot more attention.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically, I don't really want to go through all the emails and because there's a lot of like salacious things in there. Allegedly, there was a reference to a photo of Trump blowing Bubba, which everybody thought meant Bill Clinton, but it turns out it was like a different guy named Bubba. I thought that this would be an interesting conversation. This segment is ostensibly designed to hold media to account, right?
Mm.
That's why we started Ombudsman Corner. These emails, like there are like a bunch of emails with reporters who were like good buddies with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, which is sick and disturbing.
We mentioned Michael Wolff in our conversation with Marisa Kabas, and he is in this email trove repeatedly, like acting like Epstein's PR rep and like giving him political advice about like how to win favor with Trump or like leverage things against Trump. He's like, what if you tried to like low-key blackmail Trump with this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, at best, this is a source-reporter relationship. If you're such a good reporter, you should know that your source is totally fucked, right? Like, you should know that this is somebody who is both unreliable and is engaging in criminal activity with minors.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're a reporter, you shouldn't be doing any of this with a source.
No.
Anyway.
Right. That was best case scenario, which is still the worst case scenario.
Yeah, like
now we are in the anteroom of hell.
He should be reporting on this stuff, and I
Correct.
think should be reporting on it immediately so that everybody can understand what's happening. But instead, he like is operating in the shadows, behind the scenes, and I don't really understand why.
To curry favor, I don't know.
But who does like being chums with Jeffrey Epstein after his federal indictment?
Right.
Like, what leverage does that give you with people?
I guess that there are even bigger secrets that we don't know about. But that's a really unreliable source to try to curry favor with, in addition to being one that's just morally reprehensible.
And yet, this guy is like still hanging around. He's probably going to write another Trump book here coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, he's proven himself to be like this duplicitous snake.
Yeah, and he still has his Daily Beast column where he can explain away all of this.
He still has a Daily Beast column? Has he written about any of this?
Let's see. Well, he also has a podcast, Inside Trump's Head. 1 day ago, Weak Trump Losing Physical and Mental Grip, Wolff. It's a Daily Beast podcast. 3 days ago, Trump's disgusting bedroom habit exposed, Wolff. God, this is terrible.
How Trump can bury Epstein files shame, Wolff.
Okay.
Epstein's brother explains Bubba and Trump's sex act email. This is why I emailed Epstein and why I do it again, Wolff.
Come on. This is just beyond journalistic malpractice.
I'm gonna share the screen.
Okay.
Wolff 72 himself answered questions from Coles on the controversy in successive episodes of the Inside Trump's podcast on Thursday and Saturday, saying that his messages showed him getting to the story of Epstein and Trump's relationship and comparing how he works to authors, including Truman Capote. Wolff said there are two contradictory truths in play. Jeffrey Epstein was a monster, but he had important things to say. And he said he had brought to light that Trump was the best friend of, evil.
Right, but then why is Michael Wolff giving PR advice to Jeffrey Epstein and not treating him like a source?
On Thursday's podcast, Cole pressed Wolff repeatedly on providing Epstein with advice, saying that although they had known each other for 25 years, she was shocked by the emails. It sounds like you're advising a convict, a convicted pedophile, about what to do, and you're colluding with him, she said. Well, I don't, what email sounds like, he said, which is incoherent.
That is, yeah, I don't even know what to make of that.
Would one have rewritten them in hindsight? Yeah, of course. Emails always are. That's embarrassing. But remember what's going on here. I am in this. I am where no one else is. I am in proximity to a story which actually most people don't see at this point.
Wow. The hubris. If anyone else had tried to do this, it's like Marisa Kabas wrote in her recent edition of the Handbasket, especially if journalists of color tried to do this. Vanity Fair, which had originally published Olivia Nuzzi's excerpt from her book and had hired her as West Coast editor, they just laid off a bunch of, hardworking, really good journalists. It's just how people like Michael Wolff survive, and the conversation that we just had earlier is beyond me.
This actually has a lot of stuff in here.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on to...
So wait, the Daily Beast is covering their own guy.
Yeah.
Fucking up.
They wrote an article that excerpted the podcast where he talks about this.
Okay.
He compared his emails with Epstein to those that he wrote for his biography of Rupert Murdoch. If you saw the emails that I shared with Rupert Murdoch, I would be embarrassed about them, but I was able to write that book that no one else has been able to write. And also a book that he profoundly hated. And Coles asked him, do you basically go in and sort of suck up to them? And Wolff responded, am I acting? Am I play acting, right? Am I playing a role? And the answer is yes. I mean, that's what a journalist, a writer in that situation does. If you want to stay, if you want to be invited back the next day and the next day and the next day, I am constantly focused on tell me what you would not tell other people. I think, as my mother would say, you get more with a little honey.
Not like this.
Cole responded, this is fascinating actually. Cole's responded, some of the honey feels like a lot when it's a convicted pedophile.
Sure does.
Wolff replied, but that's the point, is to get the story of the convicted pedophile. I could have easily not gotten the story and could have said, you're a fucking pedophile and I can't see you anymore. This is a story that I have told as often as I can in as many places as I can. Okay, this keeps jumping around. I can't read it anymore.
Okay.
What do you think of that? I mean, that's access journalism, baby.
That is all access journalism.
Let's be buddies and give advice to the convicted pedophile, man. It's just getting the story, bro.
And again, besides the moral reprehensibility, it completely skirts what is this source reliable, which is always the question that journalists should be asking. And
are you reliable as a journalist if you're also out here giving chummy advice?
Chummy advice and also play acting, because what information are you going to get with that? There's a difference between a little bit of honey gets you a long way and just saturating everything with honey.
Also, he didn't report the things that were said in those emails either.
That is true. He held on to them for years for his book, for his own personal gain.
Yeah, I understand that there's a game that needs to be played, but it's really, really sickening.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I'm not Michael Wolff. I don't know. But Jesus.
I'd rather have my integrity.
There's another reporter that showed up in all of these, a former New York Times reporter named Landon Thomas Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was even worse, I think.
He was fired in 2019 for allegedly soliciting something like $30,000 in charitable donations from Epstein.
From Epstein himself.
Just casually asking a source, yo, bro, can I get some money? Tens of thousands of dollars.
Have you ever asked a source for a charitable contribution before?
I have not. I don't think
I have either. I quoted an ex-girlfriend once, but I also disclosed that we were exes.
Yeah, also
and also she had a really unique perspective on the story that I was writing.
Yeah, you also make sure you pay for the drinks or the coffee or whatever. This is journalist 101.
I wrote about this in my newsletter, but when I wrote about Nuzzi, and I still am saying her name in a different way every time I feel like.
It's okay.
But I reported on the Overwatch World Championship Series last year. Actually, they just had their championship for this year, and I was really jealous I wasn't in Stockholm for that one also. But they offered me a $75 sweatshirt. It was really nice. It was white with really a fun design on it. And I said no.
Right.
Because it wasn't under $35 like retail value.
Yeah. Right. And meanwhile, we're worrying about this stuff.
I'm worrying about this, and fucking Michael Wolff is out here, and like Landon Thomas Jr. is out here going, yo, Epstein, give me money. Yo, Epstein, there is a investigative journalist and former NYPD detective like digging around your story. He like tipped off Epstein about another journalist who was investigating him.
That's wild.
Yeah. This guy, Epstein, was just palling around with a bunch of people, including journalists. What does it say about the state of journalism that he had apparently so many close relationships with journalists, and yet we didn't get the story of Epstein until the Miami Herald broke it in 2000, what was it, 18, I think? 19? I think it was 19.
It says that access journalism is actually cutting off access, from the American people, from readers, to the information that we all need to survive in this country, if you ask me.
It wasn't Michael Wolff coming up with the scandal.
It's access journalism for who? It's access for the journalist, but it's not access for the reader.
Well, Landon Thomas also was the guy who Epstein emailed and was like, hey, do you want pictures of Trump in my kitchen with girls in bikinis?
And he said...
I think it was inconclusive. The original reading was that he had replied, yeah, but I think on second read, he was saying yeah to the previous question.
Mm-hmm.
So people like kind of unfairly ran with that, and he kind of was non-committal. But like, how are you, a fucking New York Times reporter, getting an offer for like scandalous pictures of the president, which would certainly be newsworthy because he's the president? And
even the offer is newsworthy when it's coming from Epstein, who's such a close associate of Donald Trump for years and years.
How do you not immediately march down to your editor and at least pass off the story to somebody else? And now we don't know if that was happening, obviously, because they're not going to disclose their inner workings. But it wasn't the New York Times that like made all these revelations about Epstein. It was the Miami Herald. It was not an access journalist. It was somebody that the victims reached out to. And they worked through the victims to get the story.
Right. And who are victims going to reach out to in the end? Are they going to reach out to access journalists, or are they going to reach out to journalists who do a damn good job at their...
I'm not reaching out to Michael Wolff. Are you kidding?
No, I don't think he wants to hear from us.
No, he's not. That's not what he's in it for.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many women whose lives have been ruined with all of this. And there's so many male journalists who have just made endless profit on it while also palling around with like a fucking pedophile. It's wild. Christine, I have a special treat for you.
I can't wait.
But first, I want you to tell a story for us, if you will.
Which one?
Can you tell us about your dream of seeing Donald Trump perp walked? Do you mind telling that story?
Yeah, several years ago, before I was further along in my prison abolition journey, I described a fantasy that I had for Dame magazine. I wrote an essay about Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order SVU doing a perp walk for Donald Trump. I think that the solution that I had to my prison abolition problem for Donald Trump is something that I can't say on the podcast, and we do not wish any ill upon the dictator on this podcast. So, just leave that. Thank you for remembering my essay, Kate. That's really nice.
I didn't remember that you turned it into an essay.
Oh, I did. Dum-dum.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
So this is former Brazilian president, how do you pronounce his name?
Bolsonaro.
And a journalist. Okay. This is the journalist on the left, and Bolsonaro, and we have this nicely captioned in English for us.
Is she calling him a moron?
No.
Okay, other way around.
Yes.
Okay.
He's saying top line, she's saying the bottom line.
Okay.
Ready? Okay.
Você é uma idiota. Você é uma idiota, bicho. Você é uma ignorante. Não quero te ofender jamais. Você é bonita. Você é bonita, por sinal. O senhor vai responder por isso. Criminalmente? Criminalmente. Polícia Federal.
Oh my God, that is the best delayed gratification I have ever seen in my life.
Isn't that incredible?
Yes.
I saw this, I immediately thought of you.
I'm going to pause my prison abolition journey to be like, Suck it, Bolsonaro. That was incredible.
I love the way that she's like, first of all, the way he says criminalmente.
Criminalmente? Yeah.
And then she comes in and she gets that smile at the end where she's like,
incredible. Incredible.
It's so good.
Thank you, Kate. Maybe someday we will have a video like that. We'll link to my essay in the show notes.
So that's a banger first edition of Your Ombudsmom Corner. If you haven't yet, go check out this week's main episode. We talked to Marisa Kabas, independent journalist, about the Olivia Nuzzi scandal and who the real villain is and all of that.
The answer might shock you.
The answer will shock you.